All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're headed to Indonesia.
A land of lush mangroves and thriving shrimp farms.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be looking at how those two worlds collide.
Because they can actually work together, you know?
Yeah, how so?
Well, imagine boosting your shrimp farm income like way up, over 500%.
500%. That's huge.
Huge. And that's the potential power of something called silvofishery.
Silvofishery.
Basically integrating aquaculture with mangrove ecosystems.
Oh, okay. So it's like working with nature instead of against it.
Exactly. And the cool thing is this isn't just some far-fetched idea.
No.
No, it's based on solid research. We're diving into a 2017 article from the Journal of Fisheries and Marine Sciences.
Okay, so real science, not just speculation.
Real-world stuff. A case study in West Java, actually.
So they got their hands dirty out there in the mangroves.
They did. And what they found was really fascinating.
So spill the beans, what they find. Can these two worlds actually work together?
Turns out, yeah, they can. The researchers found a direct link between mangrove coverage and shrimp catches. Meaning, the denser the mangroves, the higher the daily shrimp catches.
Wow, so it's a win-win. Good for the environment and good for the local economy.
Exactly. Protecting the mangroves actually puts money in people's pockets.
That's incredible. But how does it actually work? What's the science behind it?
Well, mangroves, they're like ecosystem superheroes.
Superheroes, huh?
Think of them as nurseries, for all sorts of marine life.
Including shrimp.
Especially shrimp. They provide food, shelter, everything those little guys need to thrive.
Okay, so more mangroves, more shrimp. Makes sense.
And they're not just nurseries, they're also natural filters.
Right.
Their root systems clean the water, which is essential for, healthy aquaculture.
Okay, so mangroves equal more shrimp and cleaner water. That's a pretty good deal.
It is. But there's a little wrinkle.
Uh-oh, what's the catch?
The researchers did find some heavy metals in the water.
Heavy metals? That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's a potential risk to the shrimp and to the people who eat them.
So what can be done about that?
Well, they propose a pretty clever solution. Reservoir systems.
Reservoir systems, like what? Like dams?
Not quite. These would act like natural water filters, before the water reaches the shrimp ponds.
So kind of like a pre-treatment for the water.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to mitigate the risk.
So even with challenges, there are ways to make it work.
Absolutely. Human ingenuity can often smooth out the bumps in nature's road.
I like that. Well, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the ecological benefits, but what about the people doing the farming? How do these ecological benefits translate into economic gains?
Well, that's where this idea of sustainable mangrove management really shines.
In terms of money?
Yeah, cold, hard cash.
Mm-hmm.
The research showed that when silvofishery is done right, it can significantly boost local incomes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How much are we talking? Give me some numbers.
All right, get this. For shrimp farming, the researchers calculated a potential income increase of over 500%.
500%? That's incredible.
Yeah, it's huge. And for banding, that's a type of milkfish popular in Indonesia, the increase could be over 400%.
Wow, so there's a serious economic incentive to protect these mangroves.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But I'm curious, who's actually calling the shots here? Who manages these mangrove forests?
Well, it's kind of a two-tiered system, you could say.
Two-tiered, go on.
So at the top, you have Perhutani, the state-owned forestry company in Indonesia.
Okay, so the government's involved.
Right. But then at the local level, you have LMDH, the Forest Village Community Institution. They're more like the day-to-day managers, within the forest.
So you've got the big government entity and then the local community group. That sounds like there could be maybe some conflict there.
Oh, absolutely. The researchers definitely highlighted some challenges.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, enforcing the rules can be tricky. There are regulations against cutting down mangroves or modifying the land, but
they're not always followed.
Exactly. Sometimes there's just not enough manpower to monitor such a vast area.
Makes sense.
And then there's the issue of land rights. Sometimes those rights get transferred without proper oversight.
Oh, so it's like short-term thinking winning out over long-term sustainability.
Yeah, unfortunately that happens.
So what's the solution? How do we make sure these mangroves are protected for the long haul?
Well, the researchers had some ideas. They emphasized the need to empower LMDH, the local community group.
Empower them how?
Give them more authority, clearly define their responsibilities, things like that.
So basically giving the local communities more ownership over their resources.
Exactly, and also making sure the benefits of silvofishery are shared fairly among all community members.
Okay, that sounds like a good start. But what about the actual practices being used in these shrimp farms? Are those sustainable?
That's where we see this clash between tradition and, well, modern sustainability standards.
Clash, meaning.
A lot of local fish farmers, they rely on techniques that have been passed down through generations.
Tried and true methods.
Yeah, but those methods may not be the most efficient or environmentally friendly anymore.
So we've got this tension between tradition and the need for more modern, sustainable approaches.
Exactly. And that's something we'll be digging into a lot deeper.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in. Could you give me a specific example of where tradition and modern methods might clash? What are some key differences?
Sure. One big one is the use of open versus closed circulation systems.
Okay, explain that. What's the difference?
Traditional ponds, they often rely on the tides, to bring in fresh water and take away waste.
Makes sense. That's how it's always been done.
Right, but that can lead to problems. Uncontrolled water exchange, potential contamination.
So it's like rolling the dice with the environment.
Yeah, you're not really in control. Now, the researchers, they advocate for closed systems.
Closed system.
Yeah, where the farmers have much greater control over the water quality.
I see. So it's a more proactive approach, managing the water carefully.
Right, and that can reduce the risk of diseases spreading, too.
Okay, closed systems. Got it. What else is on the list of recommendations?
Another big one is water quality monitoring.
Meaning?
Regularly checking things like salinity, pH, and dissolved oxygen levels in the ponds.
Okay, so like taking the water's temperature, making sure it's healthy.
Exactly. A lot of traditional ponds don't do that.
And why is that important?
Well, it allows farmers to make adjustments, to
Okay.
ensure the best possible conditions for their shrimp.
Makes sense. So it's all about being more data-driven, really understanding the science behind what's happening in those ponds.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Okay, what else did the researchers find?
Finally, there's the issue of feeding regimens.
Oh, you mean how much and what they feed the shrimp?
Exactly. Many traditional fish farmers don't have structured feeding plans.
So they just kind of throw food in and hope for the best.
Pretty much, which can lead to overfeeding, wasted resources, and, negative impacts on the water quality.
So it's not just about throwing some food in the water. There's a real art to it.
There is. The researchers recommend specific feeding protocols, based on the species being raised and their nutritional needs.
So optimizing every aspect of the process.
Yeah, making it both productive and environmentally sound.
Okay, I'm getting the picture.
Mm.
Mangroves are vital for the ecosystem, and when managed well, they can boost the local economy too. But the current system, it sounds like it could use some work.
Yeah, definitely room for improvement.
So how do we bridge the gap between tradition and modern sustainability?
Well, that's where the concept of good aquaculture practices, or GAP, comes in.
GAP, all right. But guidelines are only as good as the people who follow them.
Right, and that's where the real work begins.
So how do we get these good practices adopted, especially by folks who've been doing things their own way for generations?
It's multifaceted for sure, but a good starting point is education.
Education, yeah.
Working with the fish farmers directly, showing them the benefits of GAP.
Showing them how these practices can actually increase their yields and protect the environment.
Exactly. And the researchers also recommend something called zoning.
Zoning.
Yeah, basically putting the right fish in the right place. Matching fish species with the salinity levels found in different parts of the mangrove ecosystem.
So working with nature, not against it. I like that. It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right, between ecology and economics, tradition and innovation.
It is.
But I have a feeling there's more to this story. What other insights did those researchers uncover in their deep dive into Indonesia's mangrove management? Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, the science, the economics, even some policy recommendations.
Right.
But I'm feeling like we're missing something, the human element,
The people.
Yeah, the people who've been fishing these waters for generations. Where do they fit into all of this?
You're absolutely right. We can't forget about the human side of this story. And the researchers, they actually dug deeper into that aspect.
Oh, they did.
They wanted to understand why those traditional practices persist, even when there's evidence suggesting change could be beneficial.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not always easy to convince people to change their ways.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something as ingrained as fishing.
It's not. And for many of these communities, fishing isn't just a job. It's part of their culture, their identity,
Yeah. Their whole lives revolve around the mangroves, the tides, the fish.
Exactly. Their knowledge has been passed down for generations. So it's not just about the money. There's this deep connection to the land.
I see. So there's this cultural element we need to be sensitive to. But practically speaking, are there any other hurdles besides just, convincing people to change their ways?
Oh, for sure. Adopting new technologies and practices often requires an upfront investment.
Money.
And
Yeah.
that can be a major barrier for many people, especially those who are already struggling financially.
Yeah, if you're barely making ends meet, it's hard to invest in something new, even if it promises better returns down the road.
Exactly. But to answer your question, did the researchers find instances where traditional practices aligned with sustainability goals?
Yeah. Really? That's encouraging.
There were some interesting findings there. For example, the importance of local ecological knowledge.
So the traditional fishermen actually know a thing or two about sustainability.
Oh, they do. They've been interacting with these mangroves for centuries.
Right, right. They have a deep understanding of how the ecosystem works.
Right. And the researchers, they specifically pointed to the traditional practice of harvesting udang hurian. It means daily shrimp.
Daily shrimp. Okay.
And they use small nets to catch these shrimp that naturally gather around the mangrove roots.
Oh, wow. So it's a pretty low-impact method.
Very low impact. And it provides a steady income for a lot of families.
That's fantastic. It sounds like there's this, like, almost poetic synergy between the mangroves, the shrimp, and the people.
Yeah, they're all connected. And that's the essence of sustainable mangrove management, recognizing that interconnectedness and finding ways for both people and nature to thrive.
I like that. So we've talked about the community level, but what about the bigger picture? Who ultimately has the power to shape the future of these mangrove forests?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is there an easy answer?
Not really. The researchers highlight the role of institutions, strong institutions. But they also point out that there's definitely room for improvement.
Okay, so what needs to change?
Well, for one thing, there's a lack of clarity around responsibility.
Responsibility for what?
Well, managing the mangroves, remember Perhutani, the
Uh-huh.
government forestry company, and LMDH, the local community group,
Yeah.
their mandates can sometimes overlap or even conflict.
So it's like a bureaucratic tangle.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the issue of enforcement. We talked about rules against mangrove cutting and land modification.
Right, but those rules aren't always followed.
Right. Sometimes it's a lack of resources, not enough people to monitor such a vast area.
I could see how that would be a problem.
And sometimes it might be corruption or just a lack of political will.
Right, so even with good laws in place, there are other obstacles.
Exactly.
So what did the researchers suggest? How do we improve this governance system?
Well, they advocate for strengthening the capacity of both Perhutani and LMDH.
Okay, so giving them the tools and resources they need to be effective.
Right. Training, authority, that kind of thing.
So it's not just about the government dictating from the top down or communities working independently
No, it's about finding that middle ground.
where they can work together.
Exactly. Co-management is what they call it.
Co-management. So government agencies and local communities sharing responsibility for managing the resources.
Yeah, recognizing the strengths of each and leveraging those strengths.
Makes sense.
Ah.
But let's be real. In a place like Indonesia, where economic pressures are intense, is co-management really feasible?
It's a tough question, but the researchers have some interesting insights.
Oh, lay it on me.
Incentives.
Incentives, okay.
Well, sometimes telling people what not to do isn't very effective.
I can relate to that.
You have to give them a reason to want to protect these resources, to see that it's in their own best interests.
Right, so aligning self-interest with the greater good.
Exactly. And there are a lot of ways to do this.
Like what?
Well, financial incentives, for one.
Money talks.
It does. Subsidies for eco-friendly aquaculture, payments for ecosystem services, ecotourism initiatives, things like that.
So you're saying if you protect these mangroves, you'll actually be better off financially.
Right. But it's not always about money. Incentives can also be social or cultural.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Recognizing and rewarding communities that successfully manage their resources.
No public recognition.
Awards.
Yeah, things like that can foster a sense of pride, a sense of stewardship.
Right. It's like saying, look how well you're taking care of your environment.
Exactly. And that taps into those cultural connections to the land we talked about earlier.
I see. So incentives can be a powerful tool for driving sustainable behavior. But we've been focusing on Indonesia.
What about the global context? Indonesia is part of a complex web of trade and environmental agreements, right?
It is.
How does all of that factor into this situation?
You're hitting on a really important point. The researchers acknowledge that the fate of Indonesia's mangroves is intertwined with global trends.
Meaning?
Well, think about the demand for shrimp. A lot of that demand comes from consumers in wealthy nations.
So my shrimp scampi dinner here could be impacting the mangroves on the other side of the planet.
It's a sobering thought, but yeah, it highlights the importance of responsible consumption.
Choosing sustainably sourced seafood.
Exactly. Supporting companies that are committed to ethical practices, these are ways we can exert positive influence.
Even from afar.
Yeah.
So it's not just about Indonesia, it's about choices we make all over the world.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness.
We all have a role to play in protecting these ecosystems.
We do.
But with all these moving parts, the local challenges, the global forces at play, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
I understand.
Are there reasons to be optimistic? Are there any examples of communities that have managed to balance these competing interests successfully?
There are. The researchers actually highlight some inspiring examples from around the world.
Oh, like what?
Well, there's the Bante Dagat in the Philippines.
Bante Dad, what's that?
It translates to Sea Guardians.
Sea Guardians, okay.
They're a network of volunteer fish wardens. They patrol their waters, enforcing fishing regulations, working to restore damaged habitats.
So it's a community-based initiative.
Very much so. And the key to their success is strong community ownership.
The community is really invested in this.
Oh, yeah. The Bante Dagat are a source of pride. They're seen as protectors of their heritage, champions of their future.
Wow. And what about results? Have they seen any positive impacts?
Oh, yeah. The results are impressive. Fish stocks have rebounded, illegal fishing has gone way down, and the ecosystem is much healthier overall.
That's incredible. Even in the face of these huge challenges, people can come together and make a difference.
They can. And that's what makes this research so valuable. It doesn't just present problems. It highlights solutions. It draws inspiration from real-world successes.
Right. It shows us that it's possible to turn things around.
Exactly.
We're not powerless.
We're not. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the capacity to create a more sustainable future.
Well said. Okay, so we've explored this intricate world of Indonesian mangroves, the challenges, the potential solutions, and the power of community-driven action.
Right.
But I have one final question swirling in my mind. We've seen these inspiring stories, these little pockets of hope.
Yeah.
But how do we scale them up? How do we take it beyond those isolated wins?
To a world where sustainable mangrove management is the norm.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Thinking bigger, beyond just individual projects or communities.
It is. We have to think systemically,
Systemically, yeah.
Address the root causes driving mangrove destruction in the first place.
Okay, so what are those root causes? What's the big picture here?
Well, it's a complex web of factors,
Well, of course.
but a lot of it boils down to global demand,
Demand for what?
Demand for things like palm oil, timber,
Right.
and even shrimp. Yeah,
The things we consume every day.
exactly. Those industries, they're booming.
Right.
And often, mangroves are the ones paying the price, literally.
Yeah, they get cleared to make way for plantations, aquaculture ponds.
It's a classic case of short-term profit over long-term sustainability.
So it comes back to us, doesn't it? Consumer demand. Our choices here in the West, they have ripple effects all over the planet.
They do, and that's why transparency is so important.
Transparency in what way?
In the supply chain,
Ah,
consumers deserve to know where their products are coming from, what the environmental cost is.
right, so we can make informed choices.
Exactly. And businesses, they need to step up too.
In what sense?
Sourcing their materials responsibly, making sure they're not contributing to mangrove destruction.
Okay, so it's about voting with our wallets, choosing products that are good for people and the planet.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool we have as consumers.
But even if we manage to shift consumer behavior, there's still the elephant in the room.
Climate change.
Climate change, exactly.
Yeah, that's the big wild card, isn't it?
It feels like we're fighting a losing battle sometimes.
I know.
What's the point of all these efforts if the planet itself is working against us? Rising sea levels, stronger storms, ocean acidification.
It's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah,
But giving up is not an option.
right.
We need to address climate change head on. That means reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, transitioning to renewable energy sources, investing in adaptation measures.
I get it, but it's such a huge problem. It can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely.
What can I, as just one person, really do to make a difference?
Well, for one thing, don't underestimate the power of individual action.
Okay.
It starts with knowledge. The more you understand these issues, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Right. Knowledge is power.
And then there are concrete actions you can take in your daily life.
Like what? Give me some examples.
We already talked about responsible consumerism.
Yeah. Supporting sustainable businesses, making informed choices.
Right, and you can support organizations working to protect mangroves.
Okay.
Contact your elected officials about climate policy, talk to your friends and family, spread the word.
So it's about raising awareness,
It is.
getting people talking about these issues.
Exactly, because every voice matters.
It's about collective action, isn't it?
It is.
Recognizing that we're all in this together and that our choices, both individually and collectively, can make a real impact.
They can. The problems facing mangrove ecosystems are daunting, no doubt.
They are.
But they're not insurmountable.
Right.
By combining individual action, collective advocacy, and a commitment to addressing the root causes, we can create a future where both people and nature thrive.
Well, listeners, there you have it.
Yeah.
Our deep dive into Indonesian mangroves has taken us from the muddy roots of these incredible trees all the way to the global forces that shape their fate.
It's a complex story, but a hopeful one.
We've explored the delicate balance of ecology and economics, the tension between tradition and modern practices, and the urgent need for strong governance and community involvement.
And we've seen examples of what's possible when people come together to protect these vital ecosystems.
But most importantly, we've learned that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges.
We each have a role to play.
What will you take away from this exploration?
What actions will you take to protect these precious ecosystems?
We encourage you to continue learning about mangroves.
And to consider how you can contribute to their protection.
After all, their future is in our hands.
And it's a future worth fighting for.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.